I'm now joined by Professor Angelica Duran Martinez. She's from the University of Massachusetts Lowell. She's the director of their Global Studies Ph.D. program and the author of The Politics of Drug Violence, Criminals, Cops and Politicians in Colombia and Mexico. Thank you very much for your time, Angelica. Now, what does this win by Gustavo Petro mean for Colombia, do you think?
Well, I think the most important thing that this election represents is that it is the first time in recent history that the Democratic left has been able to win an election. This is the third run for Gustavo Petro, and previous leftist candidates have not achieved the level of voting that Gustavo Petro has been able to achieve. And that's partially because of consequences of the armed conflict and the fear that people had about voting for the left. And this election is changing that completely, and that's a major change for Colombia, which has been governed historically by the traditional parties or politicians emerging from those traditional political families and more towards the center of the political spectrum or the right.
Tell us more about Francia Marquez. I hope I've pronounced her name properly. She's now the country's first black VP. What does this kind of representation mean for Colombians?
Yeah, Francia Marquez, that's, of course, I will say, like the other huge representative thing from this election, which is the first time we have a female black vice president. She's what also makes her very important and very like a huge change for Colombia is that she represents a social leader, and she represents the victims of the armed conflict. She represents a long-lasting fight for protecting natural resources and for social justice. So she not only represents you know, the demographic aspects of having a female black president, which is huge, but she also represents certain sectors of Colombia that have been traditionally underrepresented or non-represented and that haven't had a chance in formal electoral politics. And by the way, I think she was very important for this win. I think the fact that she ended up being the candidate brought a level of social mobilization and voting to Petro that he didn't have before, so she has been very consequential for this win.
Now, Petro faces a deeply polarized society where polls show growing distrust in almost all major institutions. What major changes will Colombians be looking for from their new president?
Well, I think that one of the most important ones that people hope to see is some level of change in the social conditions and the social inequality of the country. I think a huge part of the voting base of Gustavo Petro is young populations, but also more popular sectors who, again, have felt traditionally underrepresented, that have had a very difficult social and economic situation for decades, and that voted for him because they saw him representing more that possibility of change that was catalyzed in the social movements and protests of 2021. But even this has been a long-standing issue in Colombia that, of course, the pandemic made worse. And I think one of the first things that a lot of his voters are hoping to see is some meaningful, real social change and change in inequality, not only social inequality, but also regional inequalities that are huge in Colombia. That's one main thing. There are many others, but I will say a lot of the eyes will be on how the country changes economically and socially.
Colombia has been one of the US's most important relationships in Latin America. How could Petro reshape Colombia's relationship with the United States, do you think?
Well, he has made very clear that there are many aspects of U.S. policy that he's critical of. And those are aspects that have been very complicated. So Colombia has had a friendly relationship and is the most important ally of the U.S. for different reasons, but one of those is that it has been an ally on main issues like the war on drugs and economic policy, and Petro has been critical of those components. I think he's also smart, and he's going to try to keep a relationship, but he's going to try to shape a new relationship where Colombians' preferences are going to take more center stage. And I think part of the question will be how he keeps that balance, but also how the U.S. Reacts to some of his proposals, which are honestly not proposals that will be very popular with some sectors in the U.S. And in general with the U.S. has been conducting policy, again, on issues like the war on drugs or trade policy, which are two of the main things that Petro has said will reshape.
Angelica Duran Martinez, thank you very much from the University of Massachusetts.
Thank you for having me.